What's up guys, this is my review of Saucony's top of the line, the very pinnacle of race day shoes, the Endorphin Elite. Let's get into it. Now guys, right off the bat, Roadrunner Sports and Saucony were kind enough to send me this shoe for the purpose of review. However, they're not paying me for this review, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. And guys, I've got to say, this is a pretty good shoe. Okay, so let's talk about price. $275 is not cheap. Now, $275 isn't unheard of, but you know, the super shoe price is right around $250. So are you getting something a little more in the Endorphin Elite than you are in some of those other $250 super shoes? Maybe. Now, I am not going to compare this to some other super shoes that I have in this video. I will be doing comparison videos coming up over the next week or so. But we're going to talk about some specs, talk about build quality, then I'll tell you how it rides. And it doesn't ride how I thought it was going to ride. And it took a bit of getting used to because of that. So you're going to want to hear what I have to say. So let's jump right in. The Endorphin Elite has 39.5 in the heel, 31.5 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. A US men's size 9 tips the scale at 7.2 ounces or 204 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, it tips the scale at 8.8 ounces or 250 grams. This is a light shoe. For someone like me, of my height, wearing a shoe of this size, a shoe that's only 250 grams is a real treat to put on my feet. But let's start at the top and let's work our way down. But before we talk about the individual elements, when I first saw this shoe, I thought it was just a little bit of everything, almost over-engineered. Now, I put quite a few miles in this shoe, and I actually think that all the elements have come together very well. But you can't deny, when you look at this shoe, there's just a lot going on. We've got the logo, we've got this band. I think really the band is the main thing that kind of stands out. We're using two different kind of materials. We have a knit material on the back, and then it comes around to kind of like a harsh mesh. It's very reminiscent of that Reebok Floatride Energy X. And I highly doubt this shoe would be very comfortable if you wore bare feet in it, but really, who does that? And I found the shoe just comfortable enough when I wear socks, like most people do. But starting at the top, we can see this heel collar, and the heel collar is almost non-existent. It's just a very thin knit piece of material that wraps around your heel collar. There's no padding, which obviously saves a lot of weight. And what's more surprising is that it doesn't seem like it's needed. This knit heel collar hugs the side of your foot very well. And then when we come around to the back, we look at this. You're asking, Matt, is there a heel counter? And then I do something like this. You see this? It just kind of presses down. There is no heel counter. There is no rigidity in the back except for this piece. Can you see this? This is like a band that comes around the back of the heel, got this Saucony logo right on the back. It comes around, and when your foot goes in, this band holds your foot right in place. Now, we do have a little bit of a bumper right here on the back, so it makes it very soft against the back of your ankle. And I think this is quite a surprising element of the shoe. When I put my foot in, I didn't really expect this to do its job, and it really did. So the knit material is right at the back. We come down and it goes into this mesh, and let's see, if I just hold this up, you can see the mesh starts right about here and comes all the way down around the toe box. We've got some overlays on the toe box just to give the upper just a little bit of structure. And then, as I've already pointed out, this band just comes around both the lateral and the medial side, and it wraps around the bottom of the shoe, and you can see it just wrapping around the carbon fiber plate inside the foam. We do have some very thin plastic overlays right along the eyelet chain and kind of surrounding the upper, just again to give it a little more structure. And you can see just by looking at it, the upper does stand up nicely. Even when I look at it right now, there's just, seems like there's a lot going on with this shoe, but it works. It all comes together. It's like there's a lot of elements to this recipe, but the recipe works. The laces are absolutely fine. Nothing really to write home about. Now, the tongue is something that you're going to want to write home about. The tongue is super thin, and you can see it has these very wide holes punched all the way down the tongue. This is a very ventilated shoe. I mean, this is one of those shoes that you put your foot in, and if you've got any writing on your sock, you're going to be able to read it through the upper. So this is a perfect shoe for racing any time of the year that isn't super cold, because this shoe is not going to keep your feet warm whatsoever. But the tongue is gusseted on both sides. I had absolutely no problem with the tongue sliding in any direction, and it was actually quite surprising that I had no lace bite, even though the tongue is so remarkably thin. It looks like the tongue isn't giving any protection, but I didn't have any issues with it, so it works pretty well. Now, there is one thing, one gripe that I have about this shoe, and if you've been observant, you might have noticed already, but if you look at the shoe right now, you can see how close the laces are together. In fact, right here at the bottom, right here down by, right above my toes, the eyelet chains are almost touching. And that's because when my foot goes in, I have to cinch it down very tight. So the eyelet chains at the bottom, they're almost touching. It's a real challenge to get my stride foot pod in this little area of the shoe. And then as my foot gets a little wider, as it comes up towards my ankle, it starts to get a little more normal. I guess what I'm getting at by telling you about the laces and how close they are is that there's a lot of volume in this shoe. Perhaps more volume than other Saucony shoes that I've used. So keep that in mind. Now, of course, I could use thicker socks. That would probably make a big difference. But I live in a very warm climate and I don't wear thick socks. Now, with that said, I actually didn't notice anything negative that came from the upper having a little too much volume, in my opinion. There was no pinching of the laces. There was nothing that was kind of pinching the top of my foot because I was cinching it down so tight. The feeling and fit felt very good. And in fact, from looking at it when the shoe is on my foot, it's almost like it was designed to fit this way just because there's no bunching of the upper. Does that make sense? Like, even though I'm cinching it down as close as it will go, no part of the upper was bunching up and it just slowly tapered up as it went up my foot. And once the shoe was on my foot and tied down, I had a great mid-foot lockdown, and I'm pretty sure that no one else I was running with noticed how it looked. Really, it's just me. When I'm tying the shoes, I notice that the eyelet chains are a little close together. But for all intents and purposes, that made no difference to the ride or how good the shoe felt. Okay, let's come down to the midsole, because the midsole is where the magic happens. Saucony is using a brand new foam. This is Power Run HG. I did see somewhere that the HG stands for Holy Grail, but I can't confirm if that is actually what HG stands for. If you know for sure, let me know in the comments. But again, 39.5 in the heel, 31.5 in the forefoot, so we got a lot of stack. We got a lot of foam underfoot. And if you look, we got two different colors on this slime colorway. We've got the white foam on the bottom, we've got the green foam right on the top. And this green foam comes up a little higher than you actually step on top of. So you're stepping into the foam when you put your foot in. The sides of your foot are kind of wrapped around with this green foam, which gives a very secure ride. That's the first thing I liked about this shoe. As far as the super shoe goes, it's actually a very stable ride. On the very other end of the spectrum, we're looking at the Next% 2. That's like wearing a pair of stilts and running a marathon. I mean, fast stilts, but still, you're sort of wobbly, like a newborn giraffe in those Next% 2s. Not so in the Endorphin Elite. So we got a big chunk of this Power Run HG. Look at the rubber on the outsole. We got a big portion of rubber right here on the forefoot. Clearly, this shoe is designed for the forefoot runner. We have this strategically placed piece of rubber right here on the lateral heel side. And if you look at mine already, I'm already wearing down the midsole foam on the very outside. And that's because when I'm running just a little easier, I am heel striking. And it looks like I'm heel striking right outside the range of the rubber. If you look carefully, you can see this gray mark. That's just some scuff marks from the road. So ultimately, by looking at this amount of outsole coverage, this is a very thin piece of rubber. And if you notice on this side, this is all exposed midsole. So this kind of tells me, with the amount of wear that I have already on the midsole, this kind of tells me that if you don't strike that lateral heel edge, perhaps you'd land on the back or even on the medial side of your heel, this shoe is going to wear down very quickly. And this is the only indication that I have that the Endorphin Elite may not be the most resilient shoe. It might not last as long as some other super shoes. So keep that in mind when you're buying. However, as I said, put quite a few miles in this shoe before I'm reviewing it, and right on my forefoot, I'm actually not looking at any wear. It's very difficult to see any wear. This rubber kind of has a wood grain in it, and I can't see where it's wearing down. It looks pretty good. So if you're a super efficient runner, maybe this shoe will last you a very long time. But for those of you like me who are not the most efficient, it may not last an incredible amount of time. But keep this in mind. I have used this for a lot of training runs. This shoe is not made for training runs. This is a race day shoe. It's likely that if you buy this shoe, you are only going to be taking it out of the stable on race day. So whether this lasts 200 miles doesn't really matter, because 200 miles of racing is a lot of racing. So ideally, this shoe is still going to last you a couple of years, depending on how much you race. And you know, this is a super shoe, so inside, we can already see this through the window right here. We've got a carbon fiber plate. It is a full-length carbon fiber plate, and it has a slotted design on the forefoot. And the slotted design on the forefoot, the carbon fiber plate, is going to give you an adaptive ride. That's what Saucony is calling it. And it kind of makes sense, because when you've got a slotted plate, and let's say you favor toeing off from the medial side of your shoe, that side of the carbon fiber plate is going to load and propel you forward. The same thing with the lateral side. So on paper, it totally makes sense that a slotted carbon fiber plate is going to make a difference. And in practice, it feels like it works. Okay. How does this shoe ride, and what was surprising to me about this shoe? Well, the last couple of marathons that I have run in, I have used the Endorphin Pro 3. And the Endorphin Pro 3 has Power Run PB foam. It is super cush, very soft. It's got that typical PB feel where the landing is soft and then it propels you forward. The Power Run HG in the Endorphin Elite is just a little different. And I would say, now do you remember the Endorphin Pro 1 and 2? How firm that was compared to the Endorphin Pro 3? Well, the Endorphin Elite kind of feels somewhere in between between the Endorphin Pro 2 and the Endorphin Pro 3 as far as softness goes. And I actually thought the Endorphin Pro 1 and 2 were just a little firm for me. It wasn't a shoe that I would use on a marathon. It was just too firm, and I felt like I would get beat up too much with that density of foam. And that's what I first thought about the Endorphin Elite. I thought, this is going to be too firm for me to run a marathon. And I was pleasantly surprised that it's not. So if we've got the Endorphin Pro 2 at one end of the spectrum, the Endorphin Pro 3 at the other end of the spectrum, as far as softness of the midsole, the Endorphin Elite is right in the middle. You might call it the Goldilocks zone. And while when I was comparing it to the Endorphin Pro 3, it did seem a little firm, I did take this out on a 20-mile training run, and my legs felt fantastic at the end of it. So with that, I didn't expect it when I first put this shoe on and went out for the first couple of miles, but this will definitely be a shoe that I choose for a marathon. The Endorphin Elite feels propulsive, it feels lively when it's on your feet, and because the midsole is just a little firmer, I think it's going to better fit runners that want to run fast at a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, and of course the marathon. Now, if you are thinking of getting a pair of the Endorphin Elite, you've probably seen some other reviewers talk about this shoe, and they might have said something like, they are not fast enough for this shoe. That actually wasn't my experience. And because I review shoes, I don't just keep these shoes for race day, I take them out and I run at all paces. And I gotta say, okay, so this isn't gonna be surprising, but when I go out and I run fast and I'm doing intervals or I'm doing a long tempo run, that is where the shoe shines. When you can land just a little bit more midfoot to forefoot, it really loads the plate, it sends you forward. But when I was running at slower paces, I actually didn't feel like the shoe was holding me back. I didn't notice anything negative in my stride that I expected to. So just based on my experience of going out there and running at a range of paces from my easy run all the way up to my tempo pace and even faster on my interval pace, I think a lot of people are going to get value out of this shoe. Like, it doesn't matter how fast you run. I don't want you to be put off that this shoe is only for the very fastest runners out there. I am certainly not that person, and this shoe works very well for me. I think it will for you too. I think the Endorphin Elite actually has a snappy ride. And I think I've used that word snappy to describe the feeling of other shoes. But when I put the Endorphin Elite on my feet and I went out and I started running fast, it really does feel snappy. And I think that is because of the slightly denser feeling of the Power Run HG. That slight firmness over the Endorphin Pro 3 actually lends itself to a very fast feeling ride. And of course, we've got Saucony's speed roll technology. In fact, look at this toe spring. That is an aggressive toe spring. And of course, that contributes to the whole fast feeling. Once you get rolling, the shoe just sends you forward. But funnily enough, it doesn't feel like it's sending you forward like some other super shoes. Kind of a contradiction right there. So you are moving fast, but it doesn't feel like you're moving fast, if that makes sense. Probably not. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you are thinking of picking up a pair of the Endorphin Elite. $275, it's very expensive, but if you are thinking of getting a pair of super shoes, you're probably already committed to spending $225 to $250. And I think for all the technology that Saucony has put into the Endorphin Elite, even though I said it's a little over-engineered, it all ties together very nicely. And I really hate to say it, it kills me to say it, that $275 is a fair price, but when we look at the competition, yeah, I think the Endorphin Elite is priced right in line with the other super shoes, even if it is a little more expensive than most of them. And with that, my name's Matt B. This has been my review of Saucony's Endorphin Elite. Be kind, be happy, run well. We'll see you in a couple of days.